Oh, at least take the dishes out first.
Oh, Lord. And yet it lasted.
You're used to Ricky Gervais being hilarious, maybe even outrageous. But at 64, he just said something deeply personal and shockingly honest about why he'll never marry his longtime partner of over 40 years. Most of us believe marriage is the ultimate symbol of love. But what if everything you thought you knew about commitment was wrong, or at least incomplete? Today we'll dive into why Ricky calls their relationship basically married, but never legally is, how his worldview shaped that decision, and what Jane Fallon, his partner and a powerful storyteller in her own right, really thinks about it. Stick around. We're not just talking celebrity gossip. We're unpacking a rare love story that challenges traditions, flips free speech on its head, and proves that freedom can be the deepest act of commitment. Ricky Gervais has never been afraid to speak his mind. He's roasted Hollywood's elite on live television, cracked jokes about religion that got entire networks nervous, and gone head-to-head with internet mobs without blinking. But for over 4 decades, there was one topic Ricky almost never addressed publicly: his personal life. Specifically, the question that's followed him and his longtime partner Jane Fallon for most of their adult lives. Why aren't they married? It's a simple question, but one that's echoed louder as the years went on. Fans wondered. Journalists hinted. Commentators speculated. And yet, Gervais and Fallon stayed mostly quiet, offering only occasional quips or light-hearted shrugs. Until now. At 64, Ricky Gervais finally broke that silence. And what he said didn't just answer the question. It rewrote the script on love, commitment, and why you don't need a ring to prove what's real. The revelation was subtle. It didn't come with a press release or a Netflix special. It came during a casual interview, almost tossed off in that dry, matter-of-fact Gervais tone. But it hit hard. Because in just a few words, Ricky shattered the most persistent myth about relationships in showbiz, and maybe in society altogether. And here's the twist. Instead of sparking scandal or outrage, Ricky's quiet admission struck a nerve. Fans weren't outraged. They were impressed, inspired, moved. And most of all, they were curious. What kind of love lasts 40-plus years with no vows, no wedding photos, and no kids? To understand that, we need to go back, not just to the relationship, but to the man behind it all, the sharp-tongued atheist, the former pop singer, the comedy rebel who turned grief into art and sarcasm into a philosophy. Because before Ricky Gervais could reject the world's expectations about love, he had to survive a world that didn't expect much from him at all. Ricky Dean Gervais was born on June 25, 1961, in Reading, England. He wasn't born into fame or money or even a creative family. His father was a French-Canadian laborer. His mother, a homemaker. Their household was humble. Their lives were ordinary. But from a young age, Ricky's mind was anything but. Even as a child, he was full of questions. Big questions. Why do bad things happen? Why are some people rich while others struggle? Why do adults tell children not to question things they clearly don't understand themselves? One moment would change everything. As a young boy, Ricky asked his mother a question that millions of kids have asked before. Why does God let children die? Her answer was the classic deflection. Don't ask things like that. But Ricky didn't accept that. That moment, quiet and uneventful on the outside, sparked something permanent. He stopped believing in what he was told and started believing in what he could prove. That's how Ricky became an atheist before he ever became a comedian. Before the fame, the awards, the Golden Globes mic drops, he was already dismantling dogma, one thought at a time. That need for truth, for authenticity, would become the bedrock of his comedy, and eventually, his love life. After high school, Ricky didn't follow a traditional path. He studied philosophy at University College London. Not drama, not literature, philosophy. Because he wanted to understand the world, not perform in it. Ironically, it was in that same philosophy department where he met the woman who would become the love of his life, Jane Fallon. But we'll get to her in a moment. While most comedians sharpen their act in dingy clubs and theater tours, Ricky took an unexpected detour. In the early 80s, he tried becoming a pop star. He formed a duo called Siona Dancing and even landed a record deal. And believe it or not, one of their songs, More to Lose, became a massive underground hit in the Philippines. Not the UK, not the US, the Philippines. That bizarre fluke would later become one of Gervais' favorite self-deprecating jokes. The music didn't last, but the hunger to express himself did. From there, Ricky drifted into radio. And that's where everything changed. At London's XFM, he met a young intern named Stephen Merchant. Together, they cooked up an idea that nobody thought would work. A mockumentary. Shot like a documentary. No laugh track, no zingers, just awkward silences, uncomfortable truths, and a boss who was absolutely insufferable. That boss was David Brent. The show was The Office, and the rest? History. When The Office first aired in 2001, British television didn't know what to make of it. Audiences were used to broad, punchline-heavy comedies, sitcoms where nothing really changed and everyone had a catchphrase. Then came Ricky Gervais and Stephen Merchant, with a show that felt too real, painfully real. David Brent wasn't a lovable buffoon. He was awkward, insecure, and desperate for validation. The kind of boss everyone had endured at some point in their career. The genius of the show wasn't just in its comedy. It was in its discomfort. The long pauses, the cringe-worthy silences, the way Brent tried to be funny and failed spectacularly. It wasn't escapism, it was confrontation. A mirror held up to office culture and human behavior. And people didn't just watch, they felt it. The show grew from cult favorite to cultural phenomenon. It won BAFTAs, inspired think pieces, and eventually caught the eye of American producers. The US adaptation, starring Steve Carell, became one of the biggest sitcoms in history. But Ricky's version? That's the one that changed the rules. Suddenly, Gervais wasn't just a comedian. He was a voice. A creator who could blend sharp satire with genuine human emotion. And that ability would define the next 2 decades of his career. He followed The Office with Extras, a series that skewered celebrity culture while exploring the fragile ego of an actor just trying to be seen. Then came Derek, a surprisingly tender show about a kind-hearted man working in a care home. Some called it overly sentimental. Others saw it as Gervais's most human work. And finally, Afterlife, a raw, devastating, and darkly funny exploration of grief, meaning, and how to keep going when you've lost everything. With every show, Ricky kept pushing. Not just boundaries, but expectations. He could be harsh, yes, but he could also be profound. And no matter what he made, one theme remained constant. He refused to fake it. In life, in art, and, most importantly, in love. Long before the awards and controversies, Ricky met Jane Fallon. It was the early 1980s. He was studying philosophy. She was studying history. By 1982, they were a couple, and they've been together ever since. For over 40 years, Jane has been his partner, not in a ceremonial or legal sense, but in the truest form of the word. She is an accomplished television producer and a best-selling novelist. She has her own career, her own audience, and her own identity. Unlike many public couples, Ricky and Jane have never needed to prove their love through red carpets or wedding rings. Their relationship exists outside the spotlight and far beyond tradition. They've never gotten married, they've never had children, and they've never felt the need to explain themselves. Until recently. Jane has said that one of the keys to their longevity is privacy. They don't perform for the public, they don't post every detail of their lives online, and they don't feel the need to validate their relationship through rituals they don't believe in. Ricky has echoed the same idea. He once said, "We are married in every way except the legal one." And that's not just a joke, it's a philosophy. Their love isn't built on paperwork. It's built on mutual respect, personal freedom, and daily choice. So why not get married? Why, after more than 4 decades, have Ricky and Jane never walked down the aisle? For Ricky, the answer is simple. They don't need to. He's said in interviews that marriage feels like a ceremony designed for someone else. As atheists, neither he nor Jane are drawn to the religious meaning of marriage. As fiercely independent people, they don't need the legal confirmation of what they already know, that their love is real and lasting. In Ricky's words, we don't need a certificate for our love. He believes that a strong relationship is built on trust, not tradition. Marriage, in his view, is often a social contract designed to appease other people's expectations. But he doesn't live for expectations. He lives for truth. They also decided early on that they didn't want children. That decision, too, was deliberate. Ricky has spoken about enjoying his freedom and believing that parenthood wouldn't add value to his life. Jane has supported that view. Their bond isn't about expanding a family. It's about deepening their own connection. Some people still don't understand it. Critics say that avoiding marriage is a way to avoid commitment, but Ricky and Jane see it differently. For them, choosing each other every day, without pressure, without obligation, is the greatest commitment of all. On January 5, 2020, Ricky Gervais stepped on stage at the Beverly Hilton to host the Golden Globes for what he declared would be the last time. What followed was one of the most infamous monologues in awards show history. He called out hypocrisy in the entertainment industry. He mocked big tech companies for preaching values while exploiting cheap labor. He even made a brutal joke about Jeffrey Epstein, turning a room full of celebrities visibly uncomfortable. His message was clear. You're in no position to lecture the public about anything. He tore down the illusion of virtue that Hollywood so often projects. Some people laughed. Others were stunned. But Ricky didn't care. That moment revealed who he really is. He doesn't flatter power. He doesn't play safe. He speaks what he believes, even if it makes him unpopular. And that's the same energy he brings into his personal life. He doesn't live for approval. He lives for truth. Ricky Gervais has always defended the right to offend. He's clashed with critics, activists, and even fellow celebrities over his unapologetic views. On Twitter, in interviews, and on stage, he's made it clear that he values free speech above public comfort. He believes that offense is a personal emotion, not a form of harm. If a joke upsets you, that doesn't mean the comedian is wrong. In Ricky's view, comedians should be allowed to joke about anything, from politics to religion to identity. This isn't just about comedy. It's about how he lives. At home, Ricky and Jane have built a relationship where honesty is everything. They don't sugarcoat. They don't censor. They respect each other enough to be fully themselves. Their home, much like Ricky's career, is a safe space for truth, even when that truth is uncomfortable. Ricky Gervais has made a career out of being blunt, confrontational, and brutally honest. But peel back the sharp edges, and you'll find someone far more nuanced. Someone who values loyalty, empathy, and quiet generosity more than most people realize. Ask anyone who's worked closely with him, and you'll hear the same thing. Ricky Gervais is surprisingly kind. He checks in on people. He remembers birthdays. He donates large amounts to animal charities without ever issuing a press release. He's known to quietly support struggling artists, to make time for fans, and to personally respond to those who reach out to him in moments of grief, especially those who've lost someone and found comfort in his show Afterlife. In interviews, there's a softness in his voice when he talks about his cat, about Jane, or about the absurdity of life itself. His comedy may be about poking at life's contradictions, but his heart is anchored in compassion. And that's perhaps the greatest irony about Ricky. He's often labeled controversial, but few public figures have shown as much raw vulnerability in their art. Shows like Derek and Afterlife weren't just clever scripts. They were deeply personal explorations of kindness, grief, and the human need for connection. Behind the jokes is a man who feels deeply, who mourns loss quietly, and who takes nothing for granted. He once said, "I don't want to be remembered for being funny. I want to be remembered for being kind." And while critics may debate his jokes or his tweets, the people who know him best already know that he's living up to that legacy. That's the Ricky Gervais most people never see. Not the provocateur, not the host with a glass of beer and a mic, but the guy in sweatpants, curled up on the couch with Jane and their cat, writing about grief at 3 a.m. because someone out there might need to laugh through their tears. In many celebrity stories, the partner is just that, an accessory to someone else's fame. But Jane Fallon has never fit that mold. She's never ridden Ricky's coattails, never tried to steal the spotlight, and never played the role of celebrity wife. Instead, she carved her own space, and did it brilliantly. Before she became a best-selling author, Jane spent years working in British television as a producer. And not just any producer, she was behind some of the UK's most iconic and high-stakes dramas, including EastEnders, Teachers, and This Life. She worked long hours in writers' rooms and editing bays, shaping stories that millions of people tuned in for each week. Her work ethic was legendary, and her eye for human drama, especially relationships, was sharp. When she transitioned to writing novels, some were skeptical, but Jane silenced the critics almost immediately. Her debut book, Getting Rid of Matthew, became a bestseller. Her follow-ups, Foursome, Faking Friends, Tell Me a Secret, Worst Idea Ever, all cemented her status as a sharp, funny, and emotionally astute voice in contemporary fiction. Her novels often center around strong, complicated women navigating betrayal, ambition, and self-worth. They're deeply personal, full of wit, and often carry an undercurrent of quiet rebellion, much like the woman herself. What makes Jane even more remarkable is that she's never felt the need to become a public figure. She gives interviews when she has a new book out, yes, but you won't find her making red carpet appearances or turning her relationship with Ricky into clickbait. Her fame is earned, not borrowed. Her audience follows her because of her voice, not her partner's spotlight. And Ricky respects that immensely. He's often said that one of the things he admires most about Jane is her independence. She doesn't need him, and he doesn't need her, and yet they choose to be together. That's not dependency. That's love in its purest form. In a rare interview, Ricky once said, "Jane is the most honest person I know. She keeps me grounded. She makes me better without trying to." That's the heart of their relationship. Not showy declarations, but a deep mutual admiration that has lasted through decades of change. By all outward appearances, Ricky Gervais and Jane Fallon defy every traditional notion of what love and commitment should look like. They're not married. They don't have kids. They don't celebrate anniversaries with Instagram posts or stage-managed public gestures. And yet, their relationship has lasted over 40 years, a timeline most married couples can only dream of. Why? Because it's real. Because it's built not on obligation, but on choice. Every day, they choose each other. Not because a contract says they must, but because they want to. That kind of love doesn't need validation. It simply exists. They've created a home together, one filled with laughter, art, animals, and late-night conversations. They've weathered fame, success, criticism, and controversy. And through it all, they've never lost sight of who they are or what they value. Their bond is a living contradiction to the idea that love has to follow rules. For Ricky and Jane, freedom isn't the opposite of commitment. It's the very foundation of it. The freedom to be honest, the freedom to disagree, the freedom to grow without growing apart. And the love? It's quiet, but ever-present. It shows up in the way they talk about each other. It shows up in the care they take to protect what they've built. It shows up in their shared jokes, their writing desks across from each other, and the way they show up for each other, day after day, year after year. They've redefined what it means to be together. Not bound by a ring, but by choice. Not reinforced by rituals, but by daily respect. Not measured by milestones, but by moments. In a world where love is often commodified, edited, and packaged for public consumption, Ricky and Jane remind us that some of the strongest bonds don't come with headlines. They come with honesty, and that's more radical and more romantic than any wedding could ever be. Ricky Gervais and Jane Fallon never followed the rules. No wedding, no kids, no public declarations. Just 40 years of laughter, loyalty, and choosing each other every single day. They didn't need tradition, they didn't need approval, they just needed the truth. And maybe that's the real secret. Love doesn't need a label, it just needs to be real. If this gave you something to think about, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. We've got more stories like this coming your way.